You are no longer authorized to touch that system. My nephew said it loudly enough for every mechanic, inspector, and security guard in the flood control room to hear. Outside, rain hammered the steel roof of Voss Landing. Warning lights pulsed red across the control panels. Beneath our feet, 6 industrial pumps were pushing stormwater away from the oldest section of the property. Nathan stood between me and the main console in a tailored dark raincoat. He held out his hand. "Your keys, Aunt Eleanor." I looked at him, then at the 2 city inspectors behind him. One avoided my eyes. The other had already opened a notebook. Nathan's voice softened, making the humiliation worse. "We cannot keep pretending this is safe. You are confused, and people could get hurt." I had designed half the system he was accusing me of endangering. Still, I did not argue. I removed the brass key ring from my belt, placed it in his palm, and let him believe he had taken control of my life's work. What Nathan did not notice was the wet coupling lying beside the drainage manifold. I noticed it immediately. Before that storm was over, I knew someone had opened a line that had supposedly been sealed for 11 years. Before I tell you how my own family tried to use my age against me, let me know where you are listening from. And if someone has ever mistaken your patience for weakness, stay with me. Some structures fail under pressure. Others reveal exactly where they were sabotaged. My name is Eleanor Voss. I was 72 that summer, and for most of my adult life, people had called me when water stopped behaving the way it was supposed to. I spent 38 years as a civil engineer, working on levees, drainage systems, and municipal pumping stations. I had stood in winter floodwater. Water is patient. It does not care about confidence, titles, or family names. It finds the lowest point and the weakest joint. People are not so different. Voss Landing occupied 14 acres beside the Ohio River in Louisville, Kentucky. My late husband, Martin, and I bought the first 4 when the property was a rusting repair yard and 2 collapsing warehouses. We had a second mortgage, a borrowed excavator, and more nerve than money. We rebuilt the docks, restored the workshops, opened a weekend market, and created an apprenticeship program for young people who needed a practical future. The place smelled like welding smoke, river mud, coffee, and diesel. Martin used to say it worked because no one had polished the usefulness out of it. He had been dead 3 years by the night Nathan took my keys. A stroke, sudden and efficient. I was inspecting storm damage in Paducah when it happened. By the time I reached the hospital, Martin could no longer speak. I spent the final 6 hours of his life holding the hand that had built half the future I thought we still had. Afterward, I kept Voss Landing running because stopping felt too much like admitting he was gone. Nathan called that grief disguised as management. "You are preserving a mausoleum," he once told me, "not running a business." Nathan Cole was 44, polished, persuasive, and almost impossible to dislike when he wanted something. He was the son of my younger brother, David, who died when Nathan was 12. Martin and I raised him. We paid for his schooling. Martin taught him to drive in an old yard truck. I gave him his first office and believed he would someday lead Voss Landing. Instead, Nathan built Cole Urban Renewal into one of the region's most admired redevelopment firms. He restored theaters, converted mills into apartments, and cultivated the image of a civic-minded visionary. When he offered to modernize Voss Landing, I accepted because he was family and because some of his criticism was fair. Our control system was aging, insurance costs were rising, several drainage lines needed replacement. I knew the property could not survive forever on Martin's drawings and my stubbornness. The trouble began 8 weeks before the storm. Nathan arrived at my office with a 40-page engineering assessment. He said our insurer was preparing to cancel coverage unless we completed immediate upgrades. The report described corroded valves, failing pump seals, and a risk of catastrophic interior flooding. Most of it sounded plausible, but one section bothered me. The consultant claimed Pump Station 3 had experienced pressure fluctuations during high river stages the previous spring. I had reviewed every seasonal log myself. There had been no such fluctuations. When I questioned Nathan, he smiled with the patient expression people use when explaining a smartphone to an elderly relative. "You may be remembering the preliminary logs," he said. "These are the corrected numbers." "Corrected by whom?" "The consultant. I turned to the signature page. The assessment had been prepared by Franklin Dorsey, a geotechnical engineer I had known for 25 years. Franklin had retired after heart surgery 2 years earlier. He had moved to Arizona and told me he never intended to review another flood wall. I called the number printed beneath his signature. A young woman answered and identified the office as Dorsey Infrastructure Consulting. When I asked for Franklin, she paused. Then she told me all questions concerning Voss Landing had to be directed to Nathan Cole. That was when I understood someone was not merely making decisions without me. Someone was constructing a record. Back in the flood control room on the night Nathan took my keys, a security guard opened the door and gestured toward the corridor. I began walking out. As I passed the drainage manifold, I bent as if steadying myself against the railing. My fingers closed around the wet brass coupling. Nathan kept talking behind me, telling the inspectors he would stabilize the system and prevent further damage. He sounded calm, responsible, almost heroic. I slipped the coupling into my coat pocket and left. 20 minutes later, I sat alone in my truck while rain streamed down the windshield. I opened the Ohio River Authority's public gauge report on my phone. According to Nathan, river pressure had overwhelmed our oldest drainage line at 9:14 that evening. But at 9:14, the river had been nearly 4 feet below the level required to reach that line. I checked twice, then a third time. The river had not flooded Voss Landing. Someone inside Voss Landing had done it. I stayed in the truck until the rain softened to a steady tapping against the roof. The brass coupling rested in my palm beneath the dome light. It was no larger than a walnut, threaded at both ends, with a clean machine-cut edge and a manufacturer's stamp pressed into the side. K24. Anyone else might have seen a piece of plumbing. I saw a date code. The fitting had been manufactured less than a year earlier. Yet Nathan's report claimed the drain line beside Pump Station 3 had not been opened since Martin and I rebuilt it 11 years ago. I wrapped the coupling in a clean handkerchief and placed it inside the locked compartment beneath my passenger seat. Then I drove home without calling Nathan. That was harder than it sounds. For 32 years, Nathan had been more than my nephew. After my brother David died in a highway collision, Nathan came to live with Martin and me, carrying one suitcase and a red plastic toolbox he refused to let anyone touch. He was 12 years old and furious at the world. For the first month, he barely spoke. At night, I sometimes heard the tiny metal drawers of that toolbox opening and closing. One evening, Martin found him in the workshop taking apart a broken bilge pump. "You know how to put that back together?" Martin asked. Nathan shrugged. "I'll know when I'm done." Martin laughed for the first time since David's funeral. From then on, Nathan followed him everywhere. Martin taught him to weld, read pressure gauges, and recognize when someone was pretending to understand instructions. I handled school meetings, college forms, fevers, and the quiet dates that hurt more than birthdays. Nathan called me Aunt Eleanor in public. At home, when he was frightened or tired, he sometimes called me Mom. That is the problem with betrayal. It does not erase what came before it. It uses those memories as leverage. By 8 the next morning, Nathan was waiting in my kitchen. He wore a navy suit. A cup from my favorite coffee shop sat beside my chair. "You should not have driven home alone," he said. "You had security escort me out of my own building. I removed you from an active emergency. You told city inspectors I was confused." His jaw tightened, but his tone remained gentle. "You kept insisting the river level was too low to cause the failure." It was. Nathan nodded as though I had made his point. The river did not directly overtop the line. A damaged check valve created reverse pressure. The stormwater pumps forced water back through an isolated branch. It was technically credible. Not complete, but credible enough to make me pause. Nathan opened a folder and placed a diagram on the table. It showed a red flow path through Pump Station 3, pressure calculations, and photographs of a cracked valve housing. "The initial alarm was mislabeled," he continued. "That is why the inspectors thought it was river intrusion. I corrected them after you left. You did not correct me. You would not listen," he said it quietly. For a moment I saw the exhausted boy who had once argued because I would not let him sleep beside Martin's hospital bed after a welding accident. Then the expression disappeared. Nathan tapped the folder. This is why I have been trying to modernize the system. The old controls create conflicting data. You read one gauge and assume the physical event must match it. I designed those controls 30 years ago. The words were not cruel. That made them more effective. He slid the coffee toward me. I am not trying to take Voss Landing from you. I am trying to keep your reputation from being destroyed by the first serious accident we cannot explain away. Nathan had always built arguments around one undeniable truth. Our equipment was old. Our insurance position was fragile. I had resisted certain changes because Martin had designed the original system. That resistance had become a weakness Nathan could point to whenever I challenged him. What about Franklin Dorsey? I asked, why does his office route questions to you? Franklin sold the practice. The company retained his name and archival models. He reviewed the assumptions remotely, but his associates completed the fieldwork. His signature is on the certification. It is a digital professional seal, which cannot legally be applied by an associate. Nathan leaned back. Do you really believe I would submit a fraudulent engineering report to the city? It was the right question because he knew what it would cost me to say yes. Before I could answer, the back door opened and Leah entered carrying a cardboard portfolio. Nathan's daughter had Martin's gray eyes and the habit of pressing her thumbnail against her index finger. At 27, she was a junior architect in her father's company and still apologized before disagreeing. She kissed my cheek. Dad said you had a bad night. He said several things. Nathan stood and buttoned his jacket. I have a meeting with the insurer. Lee can stay with you. I do not require supervision. No, he said. You require support. After he left, Leah remained near the door. He is scared. She said. Of what? That you will wait too long to make changes. That someone will be injured, and everything you and Uncle Martin built will be lost. I asked if she had worked on the Dorsey assessment. She shook her head too quickly. No, that was handled above my level. Then she placed the portfolio on the table. A corner of a drawing slid free. I saw the title block before she pushed it back inside. Voss Landing Redevelopment Phase 1. The date beneath it was 4 months old, long before Nathan claimed the first safety emergency had occurred. That afternoon, I found Franklin Dorsey's personal number in an address book Martin had kept beside our home phone. Franklin answered on the 6th ring. When I told him about the assessment, the silence lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. Then he said, Eleanor, I never reviewed Voss Landing. I never signed that report. He lowered his voice, and someone has been using my professional seal. Do not confront him yet. Franklin said. His voice had lost the warmth I remembered from engineering conferences and long lunches with Martin. What remained was the careful tone of a man who had just discovered his name attached to something dangerous. I can send you a sworn statement, he continued. But if Nathan's company used my seal without permission, I need to notify the Kentucky Board of Engineers and my attorney. Not this morning, Eleanor. I need to know how far this goes before he learns I have spoken to you. Franklin exhaled slowly. You always did inspect the entire wall before repairing the first crack. And you always talked too much before breakfast. That earned a faint laugh. Then he promised to preserve his old licensing records, correspondence, and digital seal history. I wrote everything down in Martin's weathered field notebook. I did not trust my computer. By 9 o'clock, I understood that instinct had been justified. When I arrived at Voss Landing, the old front office looked as though someone had begun erasing me. 2 workers were removing the brass nameplate from my door. Eleanor Voss, founder and operations director, the younger man froze when he saw me. The screwdriver remained pressed against the final corner. Mrs. Voss, he said, we were told this was being converted into a conference room. By whom? He glanced toward the hallway. Nathan appeared carrying a tablet. By me. He wore no suit that morning. His sleeves were rolled neatly to his forearms, giving him the appearance of a practical man who had arrived early to solve a crisis. Behind him stood Marcy Bell, my administrative assistant of 17 years. She held a cardboard box against her stomach. Marcy had managed my calendar, corrected my spelling, and remembered which employees had children in college. She also knew where every insurance report, environmental permit, and handwritten maintenance note was stored. What is in the box? I asked. Her eyes filled before Nathan answered. Personal items. Whose? Marcy is being reassigned to our downtown office. I did not reassign her. Nathan stepped closer and lowered his voice. After last night, all operational reporting must pass through a centralized management structure. Marcy's records are being transferred to legal review. My records, my office, my employee. He presented each theft as a procedural improvement. Marcy looked at me over the top of the box. I am sorry, she whispered. Nathan turned slightly toward her. You have nothing to apologize for. The sentence sounded compassionate. It was also a warning. I moved aside and let her pass. If I had demanded that she stay, Nathan would have placed her between us. Marcy had a husband recovering from heart surgery and a daughter still in college. Loyalty becomes complicated when another person controls the paycheck. Inside my office, the change was worse. Martin's framed original site plan had been removed from the wall. The locked file cabinet stood open and empty. My reference binders were gone. Even the small wooden model of the first dry dock had disappeared from the shelf. Only Martin's old drafting stool remained, as though someone had decided it was too worn to steal. Where are the maintenance archives? I asked. Digitized, where are the originals? Secure storage, which location? Nathan's patience thinned. You do not need to manage paper files anymore. I asked where they are. And I am telling you that the company is protecting them. He held out a new identification card attached to a blue lanyard. My photograph was printed beneath the words Founder Advisory Access. I turned it over. The black strip on the back carried a limited access code. You changed the security system overnight? The upgrade was already scheduled. No, it was not. Nathan looked past me toward the two workers in the hall. Can we have privacy? They left immediately. Once the door closed, his expression hardened. You spoke to Franklin Dorsey. It was not a question. For one careless second, I almost looked at my phone. Nathan noticed the movement. His smile returned. Franklin called the main office asking for copies of the assessment. My legal department flagged it. You have a legal department monitoring calls from retired engineers? I have a legal department protecting us from confusion. There was that word again. He used it like a drop of dye in clear water, just enough to change how everyone saw me. Franklin says he never reviewed the property. Franklin is 78 and recovering from major surgery. He knows whether he signed a report, does he? Nathan allowed the silence to settle. Then he placed the new access card on my desk. You are welcome here during business hours. You can attend public events, meet tenants, and advise Leah on the historical preservation plans. Historical preservation? We are exploring every option. The drawings in Leah's portfolio were dated 4 months ago. A flicker crossed his face, not fear, irritation, concept studies, nothing more. You planned redevelopment before the first failure. I planned for the possibility that the property could become financially unsustainable. With whose money? Nathan's shoulders relaxed. At the moment, mine. He explained that Cole Urban Renewal had advanced nearly $800,000 for emergency engineering, temporary repairs, insurance consultants, and new control equipment. According to him, he had placed his own company at risk because banks would not lend directly to Voss Landing under my current management. It was a persuasive lie because parts of it were probably true. Later, Leah found me sitting alone on Martin's drafting stool. She closed the door behind her. Dad did put money into the upgrades, she said. A lot of it. Did you see the accounts? No, but I saw him cancel 2 projects. Projects can be postponed for many reasons. He is trying to save this place. Her voice cracked on the final word. I looked at her carefully. Leah was defending her father, but she was also pleading with me to give her a version of events that did not require choosing between us. I touched her hand. I hope you are right. That afternoon I tested the new access card. It opened the market hall, the repair yard, the apprenticeship building, and my former office. It even opened the exterior door to Pump Station 3. But beneath the main stairs, a second steel door protected the underground pump gallery. I pressed my card to the reader. A red light flashed, access denied. Then I heard metal strike concrete on the other side. Someone was inside the gallery. Nathan had specifically forbidden me to enter. I stepped away from the steel door before whoever was inside could hear me breathing. The metal struck concrete again. Then came the slow scrape of something heavy being dragged across the gallery floor. I pressed my ear near the seam. The pumps below produced a constant mechanical vibration, but another sound moved through it, a short burst from a power tool, followed by two muted voices. I could not make out the words. The access reader still glowed red beside my hand. Nathan had not merely restricted my card. He had placed people inside the most sensitive part of the flood system and made certain I could not see what they were doing. I considered knocking. That was what the old version of me would have done. I would have demanded entry, cited my ownership authority, and forced whoever stood behind the door to explain themselves. But Nathan had already built a story in which every objection proved I was irrational. So I walked away. At the end of the corridor, I passed a security camera mounted above the stairwell. Its small green light was on. I lifted my face toward it and gave the lens the distracted expression of an elderly woman who had wandered into the wrong section. Then I returned to my office and asked Leah whether she wanted lunch. She stared at me. Lunch? I have not eaten. Her surprise told me more than an accusation would have. Nathan had prepared her for a confrontation. Perhaps he was waiting for me to pound on the gallery door so he could describe another episode of confusion. Instead, I bought Leah a bowl of tomato soup in the market hall and listened while she talked about adaptive reuse, public spaces, and the difficulty of preserving industrial buildings. She relaxed slowly. For 20 minutes, I allowed myself to enjoy her company. That was not part of a strategy. Leah had been bringing drawings to my kitchen table since she was 7 years old. She used to design impossible houses with rooftop orchards and bridges connecting every bedroom. I wanted to believe some part of that child remained untouched by Nathan's ambition. Near the end of lunch, my phone rang. It was Eddie Ruiz, the overnight dockmaster. "Mrs. Voss," he said, "you need to come to Workshop 6. His voice carried the strained control of a man trying not to alarm someone nearby. "What happened? Water, how much?" "Enough." Workshop 6 occupied the north end of the oldest warehouse. 3 boat carpenters leased the space, along with a woman named June Halpern, who restored antique river instruments. When Leah and I arrived, water was already creeping beneath the double doors. Nathan stood in the corridor, with 2 maintenance employees and a city inspector. He turned as soon as he saw me. "You should go home," he said. I ignored him and stepped into the workshop. The water reached the soles of my shoes. It covered nearly the entire concrete floor in a shallow, muddy sheet. Wooden tool cabinets had been lifted onto benches. A stack of unfinished mahogany panels stood on blocks near the wall. June was kneeling beside a damaged crate, wrapping a brass navigation compass in towels. "My inventory was supposed to be moved yesterday," she said. "Your office canceled the work order." Nathan answered before I could. That order was delayed because Mrs. Voss had not approved the relocation. He said it without looking at me. The inspector wrote something in his notebook. I crouched near the nearest wall and touched the wet concrete. The water was cool but not river cold. It carried a thin layer of gray sediment. Nathan watched me. "The north drainage branch failed under reverse pressure," he explained. "Exactly as the assessment predicted." "Which branch?" He pointed toward the eastern wall. A dark line of moisture spread along the base of the brickwork. I crossed the room slowly. If river pressure had forced water through the old north branch, the highest staining should have appeared near the exterior drain opening. Sediment would have collected in a fan shape beneath it. The water would also have carried the fine brown silt common along that section of the Ohio River. None of those things were present. Instead, the darkest watermarks began near an internal service wall separating Workshop 6 from the underground utility corridor. The flow pattern moved outward from the center of the building, not inward from the river. I dipped 2 fingers into the sediment and rubbed them together. The grit was sharp. River silt becomes smooth after years of movement. This material contained tiny angular fragments that scratched against my skin. Crushed mortar, fresh concrete dust. Someone had opened masonry nearby. Nathan came up behind me. "What are you doing?" "Looking. The inspector has already identified the probable cause." The inspector cleared his throat. "I have not reached a final conclusion." Nathan turned toward him with a courteous smile. "Of course, I only meant that the evidence is consistent with the Dorsey assessment." I stood and faced the internal wall. A row of metal shelving covered most of it. Behind the shelves, Near floor level, I noticed a narrow stream of water slipping through a joint where old brick met a newer concrete patch. The patch was painted the same faded gray as the surrounding wall, but the paint had not fully dried. I reached toward it. Nathan caught my wrist, not violently, firmly enough. This area may be structurally unsafe. I looked down at his hand until he released me. The paint is fresh. Emergency maintenance. Performed when last night? By whom? The contractor. What contractor? Nathan gave me the expression he reserved for people he considered beneath the conversation. You are no longer directing emergency operations. Eddie stood near the doorway, watching us. His face revealed nothing, but his right hand was closed tightly around a ring of keys. The city inspector ordered the shelves moved. Nathan objected, claiming the wall needed to be assessed first. The inspector insisted. When the workers pulled the first shelving unit aside, a rectangular section of newly repaired masonry appeared behind it. Water seeped from its lower edge. The dimensions matched the service passage running from the restricted pump gallery. Nathan explained that the opening had been necessary to inspect a buried drain connection. Where is the permit? I asked. It was emergency work. Where is the work order? My office has it. Where is the removed masonry? His eyes shifted for the first time. Only slightly, but I saw it outside the workshop. Leah touched my elbow. Maybe Dad really did authorize an inspection. At midnight? He said it was an emergency. It became an emergency after someone cut through that wall. Her hand fell away. Nathan spent the rest of the afternoon containing the situation. He arranged cleanup crews, called the insurer, and gave the inspector copies of selected maintenance reports. I did something simpler. I asked Marcy's replacement for the security recording from the North Warehouse corridor. She returned 20 minutes later with a digital file and Nathan's written permission to view it. The footage showed Workshop 6 from midnight until the alarm sounded. At 1:06 the corridor was empty. At 1:07 it was still empty. The clock continued moving, but a hanging plastic sheet near the door repeated the same small ripple every 12 seconds. I watched the sequence 5 times. Someone had not erased the footage. They had replaced it with a loop, and whoever created that loop had access to the new security system Nathan installed the night before he locked me out. I made my first serious mistake. The next morning, I confronted Nathan before I understood how carefully he had prepared for me. The security office occupied a glass-walled room above the market hall. When I arrived, Nathan was already there with Leah, the city inspector from Workshop 6, and a woman named Celeste Warren, counsel for Coal Urban Renewal. The looped footage played on the largest monitor. Every 12 seconds, the plastic sheet near the workshop door lifted in precisely the same way. Nathan watched it without visible concern. It appears the recording system froze, he said. It did not freeze. The clock continues moving. Celeste folded her hands over a leather portfolio. Digital recordings can retain timestamp progression during a playback malfunction. That is not what happened. Nathan turned toward the security technician, Mr. Hanley. The technician shifted in his chair. The new system was still synchronizing with the old server. A duplicated video segment is possible. Possible, I repeated. Or convenient? The room became quiet. Nathan did not react. Celeste did. Mrs. Voss, are you accusing an employee of destroying evidence? I am saying someone replaced the footage. Based on what forensic analysis? Based on my eyes, she gave me a small sympathetic smile. That may not be sufficient. It was the kind of smile people use when they want witnesses to remember how reasonable they were. I placed the brass coupling on the desk. This came from beside the north drainage manifold. The manufacturer's code shows it was produced last year. Your report says that line had not been opened in 11 years. Nathan looked at the fitting. For half a second I saw recognition. Then he picked it up and turned it between his fingers. This is a common coupling, not in our original system. It could have come from any maintenance cart. It was wet, it was raining, it was inside the control room. Nathan set it down gently. You found a piece of hardware on the floor during an emergency and decided it proved sabotage. I found evidence that your report is false. Lee flinched. The inspector stopped writing and looked up. Nathan's face remained controlled, but his voice changed. You spoke to Franklin Dorsey. You accused me of using his seal. You wandered into a restricted utility corridor. Now you are alleging that someone deliberately flooded a workshop. I did not wander anywhere. You tried to enter an active construction zone after being told it was unsafe. It is my property, and that belief is exactly why we are here. He nodded to Celeste. She opened her portfolio and removed a stack of documents. On top was a copy of the Dorsey assessment. Beneath it were maintenance statements signed by Sam Baird and 2 pump technicians. Each statement claimed I had postponed recommended repairs during the previous 18 months. I read Sam's signature twice. He had worked beside Martin for 26 years, Nathan continued. Last November, Sam requested permission to replace the north check valve. You denied it. I postponed it until after the winter inspection. According to your handwritten note, you said Martin's assembly had never failed. It had not. That is not an engineering reason. It was not the only reason. Then what was? I searched my memory. The request had been expensive. The supplier's pressure ratings were incomplete. I had asked for additional documentation. But standing beneath the bright office lights with everyone waiting, I could not remember the supplier's name. Nathan saw the hesitation. He lowered his voice. Aunt Eleanor, no one is attacking you. You removed me from my office to reduce pressure. You locked me out of the pump gallery. To protect you, you moved my records to preserve them. Every act of control became an act of care the moment he described it. I should have stopped. Instead, I pushed the coupling toward him. You opened that drainage line. You cut through the service wall, released water into Workshop 6, and replaced the security footage. Leah stood abruptly. Aunt Eleanor, her face had gone pale. Nathan did not defend himself. He looked wounded. That was when I understood I had given him exactly what he wanted. Celeste slowly closed the portfolio. For the record, Mrs. Voss has accused Mr. Cole of criminal sabotage in the presence of a city official and 2 employees. Nathan turned to the inspector. I apologize. This is a family matter that has become painful. He said family as though I had contaminated the word. I looked at Leah. You saw the redevelopments. They were concept studies. They were prepared before the failures. That does not mean Dad caused them. You do not know what it means. Her thumbnail pressed hard against her index finger. I know he has spent months trying to keep this place open while you reject every change because Uncle Martin did not design it. The words struck more deeply because part of them was true. I had rejected changes. I had delayed decisions. I had sometimes heard Martin's criticism in every contractor's recommendation. Nathan moved beside his daughter, but did not touch her. He did not need to. Lee had chosen the safer side of the room. Celeste removed one final document. It was a letter from my physician, Dr. Malcolm Reeves. I had seen him twice after Martin died because I was not sleeping. He had asked whether I misplaced objects, missed appointments, or had trouble concentrating. At the time, I answered honestly, grief had made me forgetful. The letter stated that I had reported episodes of disorientation, disrupted memory, and impaired concentration. It recommended a complete cognitive evaluation before I continued managing safety-critical infrastructure. This is confidential medical information, I said. Nathan looked genuinely sorrowful. You signed a release when Cole Urban Renewal assumed temporary risk management responsibility. I signed an insurance authorization. The language included medical fitness, where public safety was involved. I read the signature at the bottom, mine, buried inside 12 pages Nathan had placed before me during an insurance meeting. He had not forged it. He had waited for me to sign without reading closely enough. That failure belonged to me. I gathered the coupling and left the room. No one stopped me. By the time I reached my office, an envelope had been delivered by courier. My name was printed across the front in black legal type. Inside was a petition filed in Jefferson County Probate Court. Nathan was requesting emergency authority to suspend my operational control of Voss Landing until I could prove I remained mentally competent. The hearing was scheduled for Monday morning. He had not merely anticipated my accusation. He had needed me to make it. The petition changed the shape of the fight. Until that morning, I had believed facts would protect me. A false report could be disproved. A forged professional seal could be exposed. A newly manufactured coupling could be traced. But Nathan was not only altering records, he was altering the way people interpreted me. If I raised my voice, I was unstable. If I insisted on details, I was obsessive. If I remembered something differently from his reports, my memory was failing. Every attempt to defend myself became another exhibit in his case. I called my attorney, Miriam Vance, from the parking lot. Miriam had handled our leases, estate planning, and employee trust documents for almost 20 years. She was 68, direct, and incapable of offering comfort she did not believe. "Do not call Nathan," she said, after reading the petition. "I was not planning to. You were absolutely planning to." I looked through the windshield at the rain-darkened bricks of Voss Landing. "What happens Monday?" he asked the judge for temporary operational authority. "He will argue that the flood incidents, your medical records, and your accusations create an immediate public safety concern. And you will argue that he manufactured the concern. With what admissible evidence?" I said nothing. The coupling proved a line had been opened recently. Franklin could challenge the engineering assessment. The looped footage suggested tampering. None of it yet proved Nathan had ordered anything. Miriam continued, "If you accuse him again, without a complete evidentiary chain, the judge may conclude that his concerns are justified. So I sit quietly while he steals my property. No, you stop fighting the battle he prepared for." That sentence stayed with me. Martin used to say the fastest way to lose control of water was to push against it without understanding where it wanted to go. Pressure did not disappear because you resisted it. It moved somewhere less visible. Nathan expected resistance. I decided to give him surrender. On Monday morning, I wore a soft gray cardigan instead of one of my usual tailored jackets. I left my engineering files at home. I arrived at the courthouse holding Leah's arm, although I did not need assistance. Nathan noticed. His eyes moved from my flat shoes to the slight tremor I allowed in my left hand. The hearing lasted 43 minutes. Celeste described a pattern of confusion, emotional volatility, and dangerous interference with emergency operations. She referred to my accusations as unsubstantiated persecutory beliefs. Nathan spoke gently about loving me. He told the judge that I had been like a mother to him and that seeking temporary authority was the most painful decision of his life. He never looked at me while saying it. When Miriam called me forward, I did not attack him. I admitted that Martin's death had affected my concentration. I admitted that I had delayed some modernization work. I said the recent flood incidents had frightened me, and that my reaction may have been too forceful. Nathan's shoulders loosened. I agreed to undergo an independent cognitive evaluation. I also agreed not to interfere with daily operations for 30 days. In return, Miriam secured 3 conditions: Nathan could not sell, mortgage, transfer, or materially alter Voss Landing without court approval. All maintenance records had to be preserved. I retained full access as majority owner, except in active construction zones. Nathan accepted before Celeste could whisper to him. He believed he had won. Outside the courtroom, he embraced me in front of Leah. "You did the right thing," he murmured. His hand rested between my shoulder blades with the calm possession of a man closing a file. "I am tired," I said. "I know I do not want to fight anymore." He pulled back and studied my face. For the first time since the storm, there was no caution in his expression. Only relief. That was Nathan's first weakness. He did not merely want control. He wanted recognition that he deserved it. Once he believed I had accepted his superiority, he stopped guarding every word. I returned to Voss Landing the following afternoon. I moved slowly through the market hall, paused twice as though uncertain where I was going, and asked the new receptionist whether my office was upstairs or down the east corridor. She answered with exaggerated kindness. By lunchtime, half the property believed my decline was worse than Nathan had admitted. People stopped lowering their voices around me. Near the repair yard, 2 supervisors discussed revised maintenance statements. "Legal wants the dates moved back," one said. "How far?" "Before the spring inspection. That is not when we found the valve damage." I know what the original report said. They fell silent. When they noticed me, I smiled vaguely and asked whether the cafe still served chicken salad on Tuesdays. They relaxed almost immediately. At 2 o'clock, I attended a staff briefing led by Nathan. He explained that every department had to submit updated accounts of delayed repairs, unusual instructions, and safety concerns from the previous 2 years. He described it as a routine preservation effort. I watched the employees instead of him. Some avoided looking at me, others looked embarrassed. Sam Baird stood near the back wall, with his arms crossed. Martin's oldest friend did not meet my eyes once. After the meeting, I wandered toward the apprenticeship building. I stopped beside an open supply closet and pretended to examine a row of welding helmets. Behind me, Nathan spoke to Celeste. Once the statements are standardized, the history will be clear. Several employees remember different dates, she said. They will remember what the documents show, and if Eleanor obtains the originals. She does not know where they are. His confidence was no longer hidden. He believed memory belonged to whoever controlled the paper. I remained beside the helmets until their footsteps faded. As I turned to leave, Eddie Ruiz passed me carrying a coil of dock line. He did not slow down or look in my direction. Something brushed against my coat pocket. I waited until I reached the women's restroom before checking. Inside my pocket was a folded piece of waterproof paper. The message contained 7 words: unmarked contractors, pump 3, after midnight, ask me alone. Beneath the words, Eddie had written a date. It was the night before the first flood. I waited until closing time before I contacted Eddie. Voss Landing changed after dark. The market lights went out one row at a time, leaving the repair yard illuminated by security lamps and the pale reflection of the city across the river. Without customers and delivery trucks, every mechanical sound seemed sharper. Eddie told me to meet him near Dock 4. He stood beside a stack of mooring lines, wearing a faded rain jacket. He had worked nights at Voss Landing for 26 years and possessed the quiet authority of someone who knew which noises belonged to the river and which did not. "You came alone?" he asked. "Yes," he looked past me anyway. "Mr. Cole has people watching the security feeds." I assumed he did. "That is why we are not going through the main building." Eddie led me along the dock toward an old storage shed that had not been used since Martin converted most supply records to digital inventory. Inside, the air smelled of wet rope and cedar shavings. He closed the door. 3 nights before the first flood, I saw 2 contractors enter through the east service gate, he said. "No company markings on the truck, no work order at the security desk. What time?" 12:43. "How did they get into pump station 3? "Sam met them." I did not answer immediately. Sam Baird had stood beside Martin during every major expansion of Voss Landing. He knew the pump system nearly as well as I did. If he had opened the gallery for Nathan's contractors, it meant either he was involved or someone had given him a reason to be afraid. "What did they carry?" I asked. "Tool cases, a portable cutting saw, 1 gray control unit about the size of a lunchbox." "Did they leave with it?" "No, that mattered. Modern control units could be attached to older pump systems to issue commands remotely, bypass alarms, or rewrite operating histories. Nathan's modernization project gave him a legitimate reason to install new equipment. It also gave him a perfect place to hide 1 unauthorized device among 20 approved ones. "Why did you wait to tell me?" Eddie looked down at his hands. "My pension is 7 months from vesting." There was no apology in his voice, only shame. Nathan told the supervisors that anyone obstructing the safety transition could lose accumulated benefits during restructuring. "My wife stopped working last year. I cannot start over." I understood more than he expected. Fear rarely looks heroic from the inside. Most people do not betray what they love for pleasure. They do it one compromise at a time, while telling themselves they are protecting something else. "What changed your mind?" I asked. The apprentices were in workshop 6 the morning before it flooded. If the pipe had opened 12 hours earlier, 3 boys would have been down there. He met my eyes. "I can risk my pension. I cannot pretend I did not see that." Eddie still carried a mechanical master key issued before Nathan installed the new electronic locks. The court order preserved my access as owner, but Nathan had classified the pump gallery as an active construction zone. Entering without a documented safety purpose would give him another argument against me. So I created one. The following morning, I sent Nathan a written request to inspect the manufacturer's plates on the original pump housings for our historic preservation inventory. Martin had installed them in 1998, and the city's Industrial Heritage Office had recently asked about documenting equipment. Nathan approved a 40-minute visit. He sent a junior maintenance employee to supervise me. Eddie made certain the employee received an urgent call about a leaking dock hydrant 12 minutes after we entered. Once we were alone, I moved behind pump controller 3. The main cabinet contained a new networked interface installed by Nathan's contractors. Every visible component carried inspection stickers and serial numbers. But beneath the cabinet, behind an old ventilation panel, I found a second cable. It ran downward into the base of the original controller. "That was not there before," Eddie whispered. I removed the panel with a flathead screwdriver. Inside was a small black module attached to the old pump's service memory port. Nathan's team had overlooked something important. The original controllers were not fully dependent on the central network. Martin had insisted on local service memory because he never trusted one computer to remember everything during a flood. The central system could display alarms, accept commands, and store reports. But the local module recorded every physical activation inside the pump cabinet itself. It was the mechanical equivalent of a witness no one had questioned. I did not remove the original device. That could be called tampering. Instead, I photographed its serial number and used an authorized maintenance reader from the equipment cabinet to create a diagnostic copy. The entire process took 6 minutes. Before leaving, I returned every screw to its original position and wiped the ventilation panel with my handkerchief. Nathan believed I was becoming forgetful. I intended to leave him no reason to remember I had been there. That afternoon, I drove to a modest brick house in Prospect, north of the city. Dr. Priya Shah answered the door, wearing garden gloves and an expression suggesting I had interrupted an argument with her roses. Priya had been a municipal hydrologist when I was still proving myself in rooms full of men who assumed women took notes instead of making decisions. She challenged my calculations, corrected my mistakes, and once stopped a mayor from approving a drainage project that would have flooded an entire neighborhood. She was the closest thing I had to an engineering conscience. I placed the diagnostic copy on her kitchen table. "I need you to tell me whether I am seeing what I think I am seeing. That usually means you already decided, which is why I came to someone who enjoys proving me wrong." Priya examined the data without speaking. The module recorded 2 manual overrides during the nights of the alleged failures. In both cases, the pumps had been operating normally until an external device ordered specific valves to close while the intake motors continued running. That command created the reverse pressure Nathan later blamed on aging equipment. "This was deliberate," Priya said. "Can you prove it?" "I can prove the commands were not automatic." She enlarged the device identification field. Each override came from the same administrative control unit. Not from the old panel. Not from a random equipment fault. Someone had entered a valid command through Nathan's new system. Priya printed the logs and signed a statement documenting how she received and reviewed them. She also made an encrypted copy for her attorney, who had access to this administrative device. She asked. "I do not know yet." Then she pointed to the timestamp of the second override. I recognized the date Nathan had spent that entire evening at the Louisville Civic Foundation Gala. His photograph had appeared in the newspaper beside the mayor at 9:30. The sabotage command had been issued at 9:27. Nathan could not have physically operated the device from Voss Landing, which meant he was not working alone. Priya would not let me leave her kitchen with the only copy of the pump logs. She sealed one set inside an envelope, signed across the flap, and placed it in a fireproof cabinet. A second copy went to her attorney. The third stayed with me. "Evidence disappears when frightened people realize it exists," she said. "So do witnesses. That is why you do not tell Eddie what we found yet." I did not like withholding information from the man who had risked his pension to help me, but Priya was right. Eddie knew enough to be in danger, and not enough to protect himself if Nathan questioned him. On my drive back to Louisville, I kept thinking about the timestamp. Nathan had been standing beside the mayor when someone issued the sabotage command from his administrative system. That gave him distance, not innocence. A competent man planning a crime rarely places himself beside the machine when it fails. He makes certain he can be seen somewhere else. The question was who had been inside Voss Landing acting for him. Sam was the obvious answer. I did not want him to be. The next morning, the city made everything worse. At 9:15, a white municipal vehicle stopped outside the main administration building. Two inspectors entered with a representative from the fire marshal's office and delivered a preliminary safety notice. Voss Landing had 21 days to prove that its flood control system could operate reliably. If we failed, the city could close the underground workshops, suspend public events, and restrict access to the riverfront structures until extensive repairs were completed. The notice was posted beside the time clock before noon. Employees gathered around it in silence. Some had worked at Voss Landing longer than Nathan had been an adult. They read the words as engineers might read pressure on a failing wall, not as information, but as a measure of how much time remained before their lives changed. Nathan called an all-staff meeting at 1 o'clock. He stood on the loading platform beneath a blue Coal Urban Renewal banner that had not been there the day before. More than 60 employees filled the repair yard. Market vendors stood along the back wall. The apprentices gathered beside their welding instructor. I took a folding chair near the edge of the crowd. Lee sat beside me. Nathan began with reassurance. No one is losing a job today. People looked at one another. The word today did more damage than silence would have. He explained that the city's decision was not a condemnation order. He said it was an opportunity to prove that Voss Landing could move beyond outdated systems and fragmented leadership. He did not use my name. He did not need to. Everyone knew who outdated leadership meant. Then Nathan introduced a man named Charles Redding, Senior Vice President of River Crown Development. Redding wore a pale summer suit and the expression of someone visiting a property he already owned. He spoke warmly about preserving Louisville's river heritage while creating new economic opportunities. He praised the workers, he praised the apprenticeship program, he praised Martin and me for having built a remarkable foundation for the next chapter. People become nervous when strangers praise their past in the same tone used at funerals. Redding announced that River Crown was prepared to provide emergency financial support if the city ordered a closure. The company would protect employee pensions, offer transition packages, and consider retaining qualified staff during redevelopment. A mechanic named Curtis raised his hand. What redevelopment? Nathan stepped forward before Redding could answer. Nothing has been decided. Then why is he talking about transition packages? Because responsible management considers every possibility. Curtis looked toward me. So did several others. I lowered my eyes and folded my hands over my handbag. The performance hurt more than I expected. These people had trusted me during floods, recessions, and years when the yard survived on repair contracts no bank believed would pay. Now they were looking for Eleanor Voss to stand up. I remained seated. Nathan needed to believe the court hearing had broken me. After the meeting, employees surrounded Redding with questions about pensions and severance. Nathan moved among them like a physician, explaining an unpleasant but necessary treatment. He had created the emergency. Now he was offering himself as the only person mature enough to manage it. Lee walked with me toward my former office. You did not say anything, she said. Your father asked me not to interfere. You have never cared what Dad asked when you thought he was wrong. I stopped beside the stairwell. I am trying to accept that I may no longer understand everything happening here. The lie tasted bitter. Leah's face softened. I do not think you understand how much pressure he is under. Then help me understand. She glanced toward the repair yard. Coal Urban Renewal lost a major project in Cincinnati. Another one is tied up in litigation. Dad has put money into Voss Landing because he believes he can save the jobs. By selling the property? By finding a structure that works. For whom? She pressed her thumbnail against her finger. For everyone. Nathan called to her from across the corridor. She turned too quickly, and the portfolio hanging from her shoulder struck the railing. The clasp opened. Several drawings slid across the floor. I bent to help her. Lee dropped to her knees. I have them, but one sheet had landed near my shoe. I saw a glass residential tower rising where Workshop 6 currently stood. A second building occupied the public market. Private docks extended into the river beside a hotel terrace and what appeared to be a shuttle terminal. There was no boat repair yard, no apprenticeship building, no public observation deck. Lee took the sheet from my hand. It is only a concept, you said that before, because it is true. I looked at the title block in the lower corner, River Crown, Waterfront District prepared by Coal Urban Renewal. The date was 6 months earlier, not only before the Workshop 6 flood, before Nathan had presented the false Dorsey assessment, before any official concern had been raised about the pumps. You designed this? I asked. Lee's lips parted, but no answer came. At the bottom of the drawing, beneath the project number, another line had been printed in small gray text. Phase 1 acquisition contingent upon municipal safety action. Nathan had not approached River Crown after the failures began. The failures were part of the acquisition plan. Leah gathered the drawing so quickly that one corner tore beneath her hand. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. The words at the bottom of the rendering remained in my mind. Acquisition contingent upon municipal safety action. Nathan had not developed a rescue plan after Voss Landing became unstable. He had designed the future before the instability began. I looked at Leah. Did you know what that sentence meant? Her eyes moved toward the corridor where her father had disappeared. I knew River Crown wanted several possible site plans. That is not what I asked. She pressed the drawings against her chest. Dad said the city might force a sale if the infrastructure could not be certified. He wanted to be prepared 6 months ago. He said the insurance position was worse than you understood. And you believed him. Her mouth tightened. I still do not believe he flooded Workshop 6. There are moments when pushing a frightened person only drives them deeper into the shelter of a lie. Leah was not ready to question the man who had shaped her entire life. I stepped aside, put the drawing somewhere safe. She stared at me as though she expected an accusation. Then she walked away. That evening I took the redevelopment phrase to Miriam Vance. Her office occupied the second floor of a narrow brick building near the courthouse. She read the photograph I had taken of the drawing, then compared it with Nathan's emergency petition and the city's 21-day notice. This is evidence of planning, she said, not yet evidence of sabotage. I know, you sound disappointed that I agree with you. I am adapting. Miriam removed her glasses. That concerns me more than your anger did. I told her I wanted to give Nathan temporary operational authority. She stared at me for a full 5 seconds. Then she stood, closed her office door, and returned to her desk. Explain. Nathan believes I am losing control because he forced me into a defensive position. He expects me to contest every decision, and instead, I will confirm his opinion. Miriam's expression became less alarmed and more interested. You want him comfortable. I want him careless. We worked until nearly midnight. The document Miriam prepared looked generous. It allowed Nathan to direct daily maintenance, communicate with city inspectors, approve emergency expenditures below a defined limit, and operate the modernized control system during the safety review. But the proxy did not authorize him to sell, mortgage, transfer, demolish, or permanently modify Voss Landing. It also required preservation of all operational data and imposed personal responsibility for commands issued under his administrative credentials. The final clause was Miriam's idea. Nathan would read it as standard accountability language. If he used his credentials to create another failure, it would become a chain around his own ankle. The next morning I called a meeting in the repair yard. I did not tell Nathan in advance. That ensured he arrived slightly unsettled, with Celeste on one side and Leah on the other. Employees gathered between tool benches and suspended boat hulls. River Crown's Charles Redding appeared 10 minutes later, apparently invited by Nathan, after he learned what I intended to do. I wore the gray cardigan again. I carried no notes. When everyone had settled, I stood beneath the old Voss Landing sign Martin had painted by hand. I owe several people an apology, I began. The yard became silent. Nathan's face remained solemn, but I saw anticipation behind it. I said I had allowed grief and pride to affect my judgment. I admitted that I had resisted modernization because Martin's work felt inseparable from Martin himself. I acknowledged that my accusations had frightened employees and complicated the city's safety review. Each sentence cost me something, not because every word was false. The most effective surrender contains enough truth to sound like confession. I looked toward Nathan. My nephew has tried to protect this property while I treated every change as a threat. He lowered his head modestly. Several employees shifted uncomfortably. Eddie stood near the dock doors, his expression unreadable. I have therefore signed a temporary operational proxy, I continued. For the next 30 days, Nathan Cole will direct Voss Landing's maintenance and safety response. A murmur moved through the room. Nathan stepped forward. Aunt Eleanor, you do not need to do this publicly. His voice was gentle, but his eyes had already moved to the document in Miriam's hand. Yes, I said. I do. Miriam presented the proxy to him. Celeste began reading over his shoulder. Nathan scanned the first 2 pages, reached the signature lines, and paused. You retain majority ownership, he said. I am not giving away Martin's property. Of course not. The answer came too quickly. He signed. Celeste whispered something about reviewing the operational limitations. Nathan shook his head and added the date. He wanted the moment more than he wanted caution. When the papers were complete, he embraced me before the employees. I will not let you down, he said. I rested my cheek against his shoulder. I know you believe that. Applause began somewhere near the market entrance. It spread unevenly through the room. Nathan addressed the staff with renewed confidence. He promised transparency, safety, and a future in which no employee would have to fear the next storm. Charles Redding watched him with the calm satisfaction of an investor seeing a final obstacle removed. By afternoon, Nathan had moved into my former office. He replaced Martin's drafting stool with a leather chair and ordered the glass walls frosted for privacy. He also instructed security to reactivate my access card, confident that access no longer meant authority. I wandered the halls until most employees had left. Near 6, I passed the conference room beside Nathan's office. The door had not closed completely. Nathan was inside speaking on the phone. No, he said. She signed willingly. The court will see cooperation, not coercion. A pause followed. Then his voice dropped. The operational authority is enough. We do not need the property transfer yet. I moved closer to the narrow opening. Nathan turned toward the window, his back to me. The condemnation window is finally open, he said. We have 21 days to make the city believe there is nothing left to save. I remained outside the conference room until Nathan ended the call. The words had been clear. We have 21 days to make the city believe there is nothing left to save. I stepped away before the door opened and walked toward the market hall with the slow, uncertain pace everyone now expected from me. Inside, my mind was moving quickly. Nathan had confirmed intent, but not method. He could still claim he meant a legitimate inspection would expose irreversible damage. Without a recording, the conversation was only my memory against his. And Nathan had already taught people how to doubt my memory. The next morning, Leah arrived at my house before 7. She stood on the porch, holding 2 coffees, and looking as though she had not slept. I need to ask you something, she said. I let her inside. She remained near the kitchen counter while I poured her coffee into one of Martin's old work mugs. Her hands closed around it, though she did not drink. Did you sign the proxy because you think Dad is sabotaging the property? I looked at her. What do you think? I think you never surrender anything, unless you have decided surrender is useful. Martin used to say Leah inherited my habit of answering fear with observation. I sat across from her. Your father said the condemnation window is open. Her fingers tightened around the mug. You heard him? Yes, you may have misunderstood, he said. The city must believe there is nothing left to save. Leah stood and walked toward the window. For several seconds, she watched a delivery truck pass the house. River Crown has been speaking with Dad for almost a year, she said. It was the first honest thing she had told me about the project. What do they want? All of Voss Landing, for what? A private waterfront district, hotel, residential towers, event space, river transportation. And the public market? Moved, the repair yard? Closed, the apprentices? She looked down. River Crown says it will fund a scholarship program. A scholarship does not replace a job. I know. Her voice was barely audible. I asked whether Nathan had signed an agreement. I have never seen the complete contract. That was not my question. Yes, the word seemed to exhaust her. He told me it was only an option. If the city determined the existing structures could not be safely maintained, River Crown would acquire the site and allow Cole Urban Renewal to lead the redevelopment. How much would Nathan receive? I do not know. You designed the site plans. I designed what I was told to design. You drew a hotel over Martin's workshop. Her face tightened. You think I do not know that? I let the silence remain. Lee had not come to confess. She had come because the explanation she had repeated to herself was beginning to fail. Dad said Voss Landing was already dying, she continued. He said the pumps were unreliable, the leases were underpriced, and you refused to see it because every wall reminded you of Uncle Martin. Some of that is true. She turned toward me. I watched the surprise in her face. Our leases are underpriced. Several systems need replacement. I have resisted necessary changes. Then why could he not be trying to save it? Because saving a structure does not require manufacturing the cracks. I showed her the copied pump logs. I did not give her the signed originals or Priya's location. I only placed one printed page on the table. Lee studied the override times. What is this device code? An administrative control unit attached to Nathan's new system. Could someone have accessed it without his knowledge? Yes. Relief appeared too quickly. Then I added, but someone also cut through a service wall, looped security footage, and produced a false engineering report. The relief disappeared. Lee pushed the page back toward me. I cannot do this. Do what? Help you destroy my father. I am trying to stop him before he destroys himself. That sounds noble when you say it. She picked up her coat. At the door, she stopped. There is a company called Blue Current Recovery. Dad hired them after both flood incidents. They handled the emergency cleanup and repairs. Why does that matter? I saw the invoices. They were much higher than the work should have cost. Then she left. By noon, Priya and I were sitting inside Miriam's office with an insurance fraud investigator named Daniel Hargrove. Daniel was a narrow-faced man who spoke only after reading every page twice. Blue Current Recovery had received more than $400,000 in insurance payments from the two alleged flood events. The company had been formed 9 months earlier. Its listed owner was a man named Peter Lang. I knew the name. Peter had been Nathan's business partner on his first redevelopment project. Daniel searched corporate filings, contractor registrations, and public loan records. Peter's address led to an office suite owned by Cole Urban Renewal. Blue Current's equipment loans had been guaranteed by one of Nathan's holding companies. It is not proof that Nathan owns it, Daniel said. It proves he is connected to it, Miriam replied. Daniel nodded. And if Blue Current participated in creating the damage it was paid to repair, we are no longer looking at a property dispute. We are looking at insurance fraud. That changed the nature of the story. Nathan was not merely damaging Voss Landing to force a sale. He was making money from each failure before the property ever changed hands. Priya compared Blue Current's invoices with the pump logs. One invoice billed the insurer for replacing a failed intake valve. The local controller showed that the valve had functioned normally until someone issued the manual override. Another invoice charged for removing contaminated river sediment from Workshop 6. My sample had contained fresh mortar dust, not river sediment. The disaster had been profitable from the beginning. That evening, Leah sent me a message containing a photograph. It showed the lower half of a contract page bearing the River Crown Development logo. She had captured only part of the document before someone entered the room. Most of the paragraph was missing, but 3 lines were visible. The first described a reduced acquisition price following municipal condemnation. The second guaranteed Cole Urban Renewal exclusive redevelopment rights. The third contained the deadline. If Voss Landing was declared unsafe before the final day of the month, Nathan would receive a personal performance payment of $12 million. Below that amount was the beginning of another clause. Payment contingent upon irreversible loss of existing operations, and the photograph ended there. Whatever followed those words was important enough that Leah had risked photographing her father's private contract, and dangerous enough that she had not dared capture the next page. I enlarged Leah's photograph until the letters broke into pale squares. Payment contingent upon irreversible loss of existing operations, and the sentence ended at the edge of the image. Miriam studied it from across her desk. Do not ask Leah for the rest tonight. She may be able to photograph another page. She may also be frightened enough to tell Nathan what she has done. Priya stood near the window, arms crossed, or Nathan may already know, Daniel Hargrove, the insurance investigator, placed the photograph beside the Blue Current invoices. We have motive for a forced condemnation, evidence of inflated claims, and operating data showing deliberate commands, he said. What we do not have is a witness connecting Nathan to the physical sabotage. Someone entered Pump Station 3 after midnight, I said. Eddie saw them. Eddie saw contractors. Did he hear Nathan instruct them? No. Did he record license plates? No. Can he identify the men? Possibly. Daniel nodded, but his expression did not change. Possibly is useful for finding evidence. It is not the same as having it. I disliked him for being right. That evening, Miriam locked the office door and placed 4 blank legal pads on the conference table. No improvising from this point forward, she said. No unauthorized entry, no taking original records, and no confronting Nathan alone. Priya looked at me. She means you, I understood. You usually understand before ignoring advice. Miriam wrote 5 names across the first page. Mine, Priya's, Daniel's, Eddie's, Miriam's. We need defined roles, she said. Eleanor understands the infrastructure. Priya validates the technical evidence. Daniel handles the insurance trail. Eddie provides lawful observations from his assigned work area. I preserve privilege, document custody, and court compliance. And Leah? I asked. Leah is not part of this group unless she chooses to be. She sent the contract page. She sent one photograph while emotionally conflicted and financially dependent on her father. Do not turn that into a commitment she has not made. Again, Miriam was right. Leah wanted to believe Nathan was under pressure, not corrupt. Each piece of evidence forced her closer to a choice she had spent her life avoiding. I knew something about avoiding choices. For 3 years I had told myself I remained at Voss Landing, 'cause Martin would have wanted me there. The truth was less dignified. I did not know who I was without the work we shared. That attachment had made Nathan's accusations believable. He had built his false story on the foundation of my real weakness. The next morning, Eddie joined us in Priya's detached garage. We met there because no one from Coal Urban Renewal had any reason to watch a retired hydrologist's gardening shed. Eddie listened while Priya explained the controller logs. When she showed him the device code and override times, he removed his cap and rubbed the worn brim between his fingers. I knew those men were wrong, he said. I did not know they could control the valves. Tell us everything you remember about their truck, Daniel said. White utility body, no markings, Kentucky plate, rear passenger light was cracked, men? One tall, one heavyset. Both wore gray coveralls. The tall one had a tattoo behind his left ear. Did you see them again? The heavyset man came after the workshop 6 flood. Blue Current shirt that time. Daniel leaned forward. Are you certain? Yes. That connected the midnight contractors to the company paid for the cleanup. Then Eddie added something none of us expected. They were not alone the second night. Who was with them? I asked. He looked at me with open reluctance. Sam. The word settled heavily in the garage. I had known Sam Baird for 31 years. He had attended Martin's funeral wearing the same dark suit he wore to his own wife's burial. He had repaired our roof after a windstorm without accepting payment. When Leah was 10, Sam built her first drafting table from scrap oak. Sam may have believed the work was authorized, I said. Eddie did not argue. That made it worse. Daniel opened a laptop and accessed the dock entry records preserved through the insurer's system. Nathan's new security database showed no contractor vehicle entering on either night. But the old gate mechanism maintained a separate maintenance register. Sam's employee code had opened the East Service entrance at 12:39 a.m. 4 minutes before Eddie saw the truck. The code appeared again at 3:18 when the contractors left. Priya looked at me. You said Nathan was at the gala during the override. Sam was inside the property. That does not prove Sam issued the command. No, she said. It proves he could have. I refused to accept it. Not because the evidence was weak. Because some truths arrive at a door the heart has already decided not to open. Sam had loved Martin, I was certain of that. But love does not make people incorruptible. Sometimes it only gives them better access. Miriam instructed Daniel to preserve the gate records through a formal insurance demand. Priya began mapping every connection between Pump Station 3 and the underground service passages. Eddie agreed to identify the Blue Current contractor from photographs if Daniel obtained them legally. For the first time, we had more than suspicion. We had a structure. Nathan had money, access, a false professional report, and a redevelopment deadline. Blue Current had contractors, insurance payments, and physical presence inside the pump gallery. Sam had opened the gate. Someone using Nathan's administrative system had issued the sabotage commands. The pieces were beginning to support one another. But Miriam ended the meeting with a warning. A strong theory is not the same as a complete case. Nathan will respond the moment he realizes we are building one. What do you suggest? Eddie asked. We let him continue believing Eleanor has surrendered. And if he creates another failure? Priya answered. Then we make certain the next system remembers everything. That afternoon, I found Sam alone in Martin's old workshop, sharpening a drill bit at the bench grinder. I did not accuse him. I asked whether Gate 7's manual release had been inspected before storm season. The drill bit slipped from his hand, only an inch, enough. He shut off the grinder and stared at the dark wheel until it stopped spinning. You need to stay away from Gate 7, he said. Why? His face looked older than it had the day before. Because Nathan is watching you. That is not an answer. Sam finally met my eyes. If you want those apprentices to stay safe, Eleanor, you will stay away from Gate 7. Then he walked out, leaving the unfinished drill bit on Martin's bench. Sam's warning did not sound like loyalty to Nathan. It sounded like fear. I stood alone in Martin's workshop after he left, listening to the grinder wheel slow behind me. Gate 7 lay beneath the eastern loading terrace, where an old flood channel connected the lower workshops to the river barrier. It had been designed as a last resort relief point, not something anyone should operate casually. If Nathan intended to use it, he was planning a visible failure. The next morning, I asked Miriam to review every document governing the city's 21-day safety notice. Buried inside the inspection protocol was a provision allowing the owner to request a supervised operational demonstration before any final closure decision. The city could not refuse without cause. That gave me the stage Nathan needed and the one I intended to control. I called him from my kitchen. I have been thinking about what you said, I told him. Which part? That Voss Landing has to prove it can survive beyond me. His voice softened immediately. I am glad you understand. I want to support a public resilience demonstration. What exactly do you mean? We invite the city engineers, the fire marshal, our insurer, and the press. We run the pumps under simulated storm conditions and show that your modernization works. Nathan said nothing. For several seconds, a successful demonstration would make him look like the man who saved Voss Landing. A failed one would support condemnation before River Crown's deadline. Either result appeared to benefit him. That could restore confidence, he said. It could restore yours. He laughed softly. For the first time in weeks, the sound contained no caution. By noon, Nathan had turned my suggestion into a production. He proposed television coverage, public tours, and a ceremony recognizing my retirement. River Crown offered to sponsor refreshments. Nathan was decorating the trap himself. Miriam insisted the event be governed by a written testing plan. Every simulated load, valve command, and safety procedure had to be approved in advance. Nathan agreed because he believed his operational proxy gave him final control. What he did not understand was that the same agreement made him personally accountable for every command issued under his administrative credentials. Priya joined the project as an independent hydrology consultant selected by the insurer. Nathan objected when he saw her name. She is Eleanor's friend. She is also licensed, insured, and approved by the carrier, Daniel Hargrove replied. Nathan could not reject her without appearing afraid of independent verification. Priya spent 3 days inspecting the property in full view of Nathan's staff. The visible inspection was theater. The real work happened inside components Nathan's contractors considered too old to matter. The original pump system contained mechanical pressure, ports installed before modern network sensors became standard. Priya placed independent gauges inside those ports with the insurer's written authorization. They did not connect to Nathan's server or use the property's wireless network. Each gauge recorded pressure, flow direction, and valve movement inside sealed memory. If someone deleted the main logs again, the water itself would still leave a record. Daniel arranged for the insurer to retain the sealed data. Miriam documented each serial number, and Eddie witnessed the installation. We created custody before evidence. My part of the plan required Martin, not his memory. His design. In 1998, after lightning disabled the original electric controls, Martin added a mechanical bypass beneath the east gallery. A weighted release arm could divert water away from the occupied workshops if the electronic system failed. The city later required an automated replacement. The old mechanism was disconnected but never removed. Nathan's contractors ignored it because it did not appear on the modern control screens. To them, it was obsolete iron. To me, it was a second path through the wall. I could not restore it secretly without entering a restricted area. Miriam submitted a preservation request identifying the bypass as historic equipment, requiring stabilization before the demonstration. Nathan approved it with one glance. He believed I wanted to save another relic because Martin had touched it. That was close enough to the truth. Eddie and I worked under Sam's supervision. Sam barely spoke. He checked the corridor repeatedly and kept his hands buried in his coveralls whenever he was not holding a tool. The bypass was stiff with rust but structurally sound. We cleaned the pivot points, replaced 2 corroded pins, and tested the counterweight without connecting it to the live gate. Nathan's project manager watched from the doorway. "What does that old thing do?" he asked. "Mostly makes Mrs. Voss feel better." Sam said. I looked at him. His face revealed nothing, but he had protected the mechanism's real function. That told me he had not decided which side he was on. It also told me he understood what Nathan might do. By the end of the week, the public demonstration had a date. Nathan called it the Voss Landing Flood Resilience Showcase. Posters appeared in the market hall, showing his photograph beside a computer-generated image of the modernized waterfront. My name appeared in smaller print beneath the words honoring a lifetime of service. The approved test would begin with artificial stormwater entering the interior channels. Pumps would activate automatically. Nathan would then demonstrate remote valve control from a tablet before city officials. If he wanted to manufacture a failure, he would have to issue a command the independent gauges could detect. If that command threatened the occupied sections, Martin's bypass would redirect the pressure before anyone was harmed. That was the part Nathan did not know. The part I did not know was how desperate his deadline had made him. Leah came to my house the evening before final invitations were sent. She did not remove her coat. "Did you know Dad changed the event schedule?" she asked. "No, he moved the demonstration to Saturday morning. The market will be open. It is worse than that." She placed a printed program on my table. Saturday was the apprenticeship program's annual open house. Parents, teachers, and prospective students would be touring the workshops. More than 80 people were expected in the lower buildings. I looked at the schedule again. Nathan had not chosen a time when Voss Landing would be empty. He had chosen the moment when a failure would have the largest possible audience. I told Leah to stay away from the lower workshops during the demonstration. She stared at the printed program on my kitchen table. "You think Dad would risk those students?" "I think your father is running out of time." "That is not an answer. It is the only honest one I have." Leah folded the program but did not put it back into her purse. For weeks, she had defended Nathan by separating his intentions from the damage around him. He was under pressure. He was trying to save the company. He believed redevelopment was inevitable, but people reveal their intentions through the risks they accept for others. Nathan had moved the demonstration to the most crowded morning of the year. Lee finally took the program. "I will find out why he changed it. Do not confront him. You have been telling me not to confront anyone while building some kind of trap beneath his feet. I am trying to keep you from falling into it with him." She looked as though I had slapped her, then she left without saying goodbye. The following afternoon, I returned to the East Gallery to inspect Martin's mechanical bypass. The preservation order allowed me to examine the restored components, but Nathan had assigned Sam to supervise every visit. When I arrived, Sam was not there. The access door had been left unlocked. I should have waited. Instead, I entered alone. The gallery was narrow and damp, with concrete walls that carried every pump vibration into my bones. Rust-colored pipes crossed the ceiling. At the far end, Martin's bypass mechanism stood behind a steel safety railing. The replacement pins Eddie and I had installed were still secure. But the weighted release arm had been moved, only half an inch, enough to prevent it from dropping cleanly if the electronic gates created reverse pressure. Someone had not disabled the bypass, they had made it unreliable. That was more dangerous. A mechanism that obviously failed would be repaired. One that hesitated under load could appear functional until the exact moment it was needed. I stepped over the lower chain and examined the pivot housing. A thin metal shim had been driven behind the release plate. I had just touched it when the gallery door slammed shut. Sam stood at the entrance. "What are you doing?" His voice was louder than I had ever heard it. "Inspecting the bypass. You were told not to come down here alone. I was also told this mechanism had been stabilized." He crossed the gallery quickly and grabbed my wrist before I could pull the shim free. His grip was hard, not hard enough to injure me, hard enough to frighten me. "Leave it," he said. I looked at his hand until he released me. "Did you put that there?" His face tightened. "You do not understand what you are interfering with." "Then explain it." "I cannot or will not." Sam glanced toward the ceiling camera. The small indicator light was dark. Even so, he lowered his voice. "Go home, Eleanor. Nathan threatened the apprentices." "I did not say that. You warned me about Gate 7. Now someone has compromised the only mechanical protection for the lower workshops." Sam stepped between me and the release arm. "You think because you know the system, you know the people using it. I know you opened the East Gate for Blue Current's contractors." The accusation landed. His shoulders dropped slightly, as though he had been carrying the sentence for days and was relieved to finally hear it aloud. "They had authorization from Nathan?" He said nothing. "What did he promise you?" Sam turned away. That was when I noticed the envelope protruding from his coverall pocket. A red notice line was visible above the fold. Final demon. Sam had never been wealthy, but he had always been careful. Martin used to tease him for keeping receipts from 10 years earlier. I remembered rumors that had circulated after his wife died. Weekend gambling trips, loans against his truck, a private card game outside New Albany. "Nathan knows about your debts," I said. Sam closed his eyes. "He bought them." The words were almost inaudible. "He paid the people I owed. Then he told me the debt belonged to one of his companies. If I cooperate, he forgives it when the River Crown deal closes. And if you refuse, he files the liens. I lose my house, your pension?" He said restructuring could eliminate that too. I looked at the man who had carried Martin's coffin beside me. "You helped them flood Workshop 6. I opened doors. I signed reports. I told myself the contractors were testing the system." "You knew after the first incident." His jaw tightened. "Yes." The single word contained no excuse. "Help me remove the shim." Sam shook his head immediately. "I cannot be seen helping you." "Then leave. If Nathan finds that moved, he will know you discovered it." "He already suspects me." "No," Sam said. "He thinks you are beaten. That is the only reason you are still allowed near this place." Footsteps sounded above the gallery. Sam pulled the shim halfway out, then stopped. "Not today," he whispered. "He checks this mechanism every evening." He pushed it back into position, but not as deeply as before. A compromise. Enough that I might remove it quickly during the demonstration. Not enough to reveal that Sam had helped me. We left separately. The real setback came an hour later. Nathan was waiting in my former office with Celeste and the new security director. On his desk sat the open cabinet from Pump Controller 3. The local service memory module was missing, not the diagnostic copy Priya and I had made. The original device. Someone had removed the witness from the machine. Nathan watched me enter. "We discovered an unauthorized component during the demonstration inspection," he said. "Do you recognize it?" He showed me a photograph of the empty service port. I allowed my expression to remain uncertain. "That is the old auxiliary voltage connection." It was not. The auxiliary connection sat 6 inches lower and had a circular housing. Any engineer familiar with the controller would know the difference. Nathan leaned forward. "Are you sure?" I looked at the photograph again and frowned as though searching through a failing memory. Martin installed it after the 1998 lightning strike. That was also false. Martin installed the local memory 2 years later. Celeste wrote something on her legal pad. Nathan's eyes moved over my face with careful satisfaction. He had not summoned me to learn what the component was. He had summoned me to test whether Eleanor Voss could still recognize the system she had designed. I had given him 2 wrong answers deliberately. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then Nathan smiled, not with affection, with relief. He finally believed my mind was failing. Nathan's smile told me the false answers had worked. He believed I no longer understood the machinery beneath Voss Landing. That belief protected me for less than 24 hours. At 6 the next morning, the National Weather Service upgraded a line of storms moving across southern Indiana. The system was accelerating toward Louisville, carrying high winds, heavy rainfall, and enough runoff to raise the Ohio River faster than earlier models predicted. The demonstration was scheduled for Saturday. The storm would arrive Friday afternoon. I was standing in my kitchen when Priya called. "The city moved the inspection," she said. "They want the demonstration tomorrow at 3. That gives us 1 day less." Nathan requested the new time before the city contacted me. I looked toward the window. The sky already had the flat gray color that comes before weather becomes serious. He knew they would move it, or he encouraged them. By 8, Nathan had announced that the Flood Resilience Showcase would proceed 24 hours early. He called the change an opportunity to test the modernized system under authentic conditions. The apprenticeship open house remained scheduled, so did the market, so did the press. Miriam immediately requested a postponement on safety grounds. The city denied it. Nathan's attorneys argued that postponing during a real storm would suggest the system could not perform when needed. If we objected, we helped him prove Voss Landing was unsafe. If we proceeded, he controlled the machinery during a live weather event. At 10, Priya and I entered the East Gallery with the insurer's authorization. The independent gauges remained sealed and active. The shim behind Martin's bypass was gone. For one hopeful second, I thought Sam had removed it. Then Priya pointed toward the release arm. A fresh steel collar had been fitted around the pivot. It would delay the mechanism long enough for pressure to build before the counterweight dropped. Can we remove it? Not without cutting it. Nathan will know immediately. Will the bypass still protect the workshops? Pump 3, probably. Probably was not a word I liked near occupied buildings. Priya crouched beside the floor plan. If he creates the same reverse pressure event, the lower channel should divert before structural failure. If he uses the same event, she looked up. That is the problem. Nathan had discovered the missing service memory module, tested my knowledge, and changed the demonstration time. He was adjusting. At noon, Eddie called from the dock office. "Blue Current delivered equipment to Gate 7, he said. "Portable pumps, discharge lines, and 2 remote valve actuators." Gate 7 was not part of the approved demonstration. It sat beneath the eastern loading terrace, where the old relief channel met the river barrier. If opened during elevated exterior pressure, it could force water through the lower service tunnels faster than Pump Station 3 could remove it. I drove to Voss Landing. Nathan met me outside the restricted corridor. "You cannot enter. The testing plan does not include Gate 7. We modified the plan, without the owner's approval. Under the operational proxy, I may respond to changing storm conditions. Permanent changes still require my consent. These are temporary safety measures." Behind him, 2 Blue Current contractors carried a valve actuator through the doorway. One was heavyset, Eddie's witness. Nathan stepped sideways, blocking my view. "You should rest before tomorrow. The retirement ceremony will be emotional. What are the actuators for?" "To isolate the eastern relief channel. Gate 7 is mechanically isolated. The seals are older than you remember." I let confusion cross my face. "Martin replaced them after the 2002 flood. He replaced Gate 5. That was true. He was testing me again." I lowered my eyes. "Of course." Nathan touched my shoulder. "Go home, Aunt Eleanor." His kindness frightened me more than the threat beneath it. By 3, Priya confirmed the new risk. Nathan had moved the likely sabotage away from the protected pump branch and toward Gate 7. Our sensors would record pressure changes, but Martin's bypass could not fully protect the eastern workshops if the relief gate opened against the river. We needed another safeguard, installed without alerting Nathan. Miriam contacted the fire marshal. Daniel contacted the insurer. Neither would authorize evacuation based on our theory alone. Nathan controlled the official reports. The trap was becoming real enough to injure people. For the first time, I considered abandoning it. We could take the pump logs, Franklin's statement, Blue Current's payments, and Leah's partial contract to the authorities. Nathan might escape the most serious charges, but the property could be protected through litigation. Priya understood. If we stop now, he will call every failure mechanical and every payment legitimate. No prosecution is worth a student being hurt. Agreed, so we removed the students. The open house began at 1. The demonstration began at 3. Nathan expected the lower workshops to remain occupied, because the crowd made the failure more persuasive. I called the apprenticeship director and said an anonymous donor had arranged an off-site welding demonstration at the Louisville Fire Academy. Transportation would leave at 2:15. She asked who the donor was. Martin Voss. Miriam could create the donation legally through the foundation. Martin and I had established years earlier. At 5, Leah stopped answering her phone. At 6, Nathan's security team began checking employee lockers and reviewing access records. Sam sent a message through Eddie. He knows someone opened the River Crown file. At 7:30, thunder moved across the city. I was preparing to leave for Priya's house when someone knocked hard against my front door. Lee stood on the porch, drenched from the rain. Her hair clung to her face, and she held a sealed project file beneath her coat. I pulled her inside. My father knows someone accessed his records, she said. He thinks it was me, was it? She placed the file on my kitchen table. Yes, her hands were shaking, but her voice was not. This is the full River Crown agreement. It shows the payment, the condemnation clause, and what he plans to do tomorrow. I reached for the file. Lee kept one hand pressed over it. There is something else. She said, Dad changed the Gate 7 programming to what? She looked directly at me. It will not stop when the alarms begin. Lee removed her hand from the file. I opened it. The River Crown agreement was more detailed than I expected and worse than I feared. Nathan's $12 million payment depended on 3 conditions: municipal condemnation before the end of the month, permanent cessation of the repair yard, and documented failure of the eastern flood barrier. Gate 7. The final appendix described the property as vacant or operationally unrecoverable at the time of transfer. Nathan did not merely need a dramatic malfunction, he needed damage severe enough to make reopening appear impossible. Leah stood across the kitchen table, dripping rainwater onto the floor. The new programming overrides the automatic shutoff, she said. Once the gate begins opening, the control system will ignore pressure alarms for 11 minutes. Why 11? Dad said it was needed for a complete emergency discharge cycle. It is enough time to fill the eastern service tunnel. She nodded. How did you learn this? I found the programming notes in his project file. He made me revise the public evacuation drawings yesterday. He removed 2 lower exits and labeled them construction access. Nathan had narrowed the escape routes while ensuring the building remained occupied. That was no longer fraud disguised as modernization. It was reckless endangerment written into a floor plan. I called Priya, Miriam, and Daniel. By midnight, we had changed the plan. The apprentices would leave for the fire academy before the demonstration. Eddie would quietly move the remaining lower workshop tenants to the market hall, under the excuse of a storm briefing. The fire marshal, now shown the full Gate 7 programming notes, agreed to place rescue personnel nearby without alerting Nathan. Daniel contacted state investigators handling the insurance case. They would observe but not intervene until Nathan issued an unauthorized command or created an immediate danger. Miriam preserved Leah's file, documented how it had been obtained, and warned her that testifying could destroy her career at Cole Urban Renewal. Lee did not hesitate. My career is already built on drawings I should never have made. At 2 a.m, she finally went upstairs to sleep in my guest room. I remained in the kitchen with Martin's old field notebook. For weeks, I had believed the most difficult part of the plan would be outthinking Nathan. I had been wrong. The hardest part was allowing him to stand where Martin once stood and pretend that everything we built had survived because of him. Friday afternoon arrived beneath a sky the color of wet slate. By noon, television trucks lined the entrance road to Voss Landing. River Crown banners hung from the market balconies. City officials gathered beneath a temporary pavilion overlooking the repair yard. Nathan had transformed a safety inspection into his public coronation. He called the event the future of Louisville's waterfront. My retirement ceremony appeared beneath it in smaller letters. The market remained open, though Eddie had moved most vendors into the Western Hall. At 2:15, 2 buses carried the apprentices toward the fire academy. Nathan noticed. He approached Eddie near the loading dock. "Why are the students leaving?" Fire department arranged an off-site training session. "Who approved that?" Eddie looked toward me. I stood beneath the pavilion wearing a cream blouse, the gray cardigan, and flat shoes. I allowed one hand to rest against the back of a folding chair. "The foundation did," I said. Nathan's eyes narrowed. "You did not mention it, I forgot." The word relaxed him. He looked at Eddie. "Make sure the lower shops remain accessible for the press tour." "They are under storm restriction, not yet." Nathan walked away before Eddie answered. At 2:30, the retirement ceremony began. More than 100 employees, tenants, reporters, investors, and city representatives faced the temporary stage. Beyond them, the Ohio River moved beneath the darkening sky. Charles Redding introduced Nathan as the man who had brought disciplined leadership to a property trapped by its own history. Then Nathan introduced me. He spoke beautifully. He described my engineering career, Martin's courage, and the early years when we rebuilt Voss Landing with borrowed equipment and unpaid labor. He even told the story of the winter flood when I slept beside Pump Station 2 for 3 nights. The audience applauded. For one dangerous moment, I remembered the boy who once followed me through those same buildings carrying a red toolbox. Then Nathan placed a glass plaque in my hands. It read, "To Eleanor Voss for building the foundation of our future." Foundation. He had always known which words to steal. I thanked the employees and told them Voss Landing had never belonged only to Martin and me. It belonged to every person who repaired a vessel, taught an apprentice, rented a market stall, or stood watch when the river rose. Nathan waited for me to finish. Then he stepped back to the microphone. "Today is not merely a farewell," he announced. "It is a beginning." A large screen behind us illuminated with Leah's architectural renderings. Glass towers rose over the riverfront. Private docks replaced the working yard. A luxury hotel stood where Martin's workshop had been. The audience became restless. Nathan continued before anyone could speak. "With Eleanor's cooperation, Voss Landing has agreed in principle to enter a transformative partnership with River Crown Development." I turned toward him. Slowly, he had no authority to make that announcement. The operational proxy explicitly prohibited a sale. But this was not a legal transfer. It was a public lie designed to make the transfer feel inevitable. Employees began shouting questions. Nathan raised his hands. "No final property documents have been executed. However, this partnership will protect pensions, create new employment, and ensure that Eleanor's legacy survives in a modern form." Curtis, the mechanic who had challenged him before, called from the crowd. "What happens to the repair yard?" Nathan did not answer directly. "Every employee will receive an individual transition consultation." The anger spread. Eddie moved toward the front, but I caught his eye and shook my head. "Not yet," Nathan turned back to me. "As a symbol of this transition, Eleanor has agreed to formally transfer operational command." He held out his hand. The crowd watched. Clipped to my cardigan was the temporary control badge he had restored after the court hearing. I removed it slowly. My fingers appeared to tremble. That part was not an act. For 38 years, keys and badges had meant responsibility. Floods did not care about ceremonies. When an alarm sounded, someone had to answer. I placed the badge in Nathan's palm. He closed his fingers around it and smiled for the cameras. Applause came from the River Crown representatives. Almost no one else joined them. Thunder rolled over the Ohio. A city engineer checked his watch. Priya stood beside the independent monitoring station. Miriam waited near the insurer's table. Daniel spoke quietly into his phone. Nathan raised the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, the demonstration will begin in 5 minutes." Behind the stage, a security door opened. The tall blue current contractor with the tattoo behind his ear slipped through it, carrying a black equipment case. He looked once toward Nathan. Nathan gave the smallest nod. Then the contractor disappeared down the restricted stairs leading to Gate 7. The blue current contractor disappeared beneath the loading terrace at exactly 2:57. 3 minutes later, the resilience demonstration began. Nathan stood at the center of the temporary stage, holding a black control tablet. Behind him, the large presentation screen displayed a simplified diagram of Voss Landing's flood system. Blue channels, green pumps, white arrows showing water moving safely away from the occupied buildings. The diagram was designed for reporters, not engineers. It showed what Nathan wanted people to believe. Priya stood at the independent monitoring station, 20 feet away. Her display contained no polished graphics. It showed numbers: river elevation, gate position, internal pressure, pump speed, and flow direction. Numbers are less attractive than promises. They are also harder to charm. A city engineer activated the approved stormwater simulation. Pumps 1 and 2 started automatically. Their deep vibration moved through the concrete beneath us. The crowd applauded when the green indicators appeared. Nathan smiled. As you can see, the modernization has replaced uncertainty with intelligent control. I stood beside Miriam near the front row, holding the glass retirement plaque against my chest. On the screen behind Nathan, water moved through the system exactly as planned. For the first 90 seconds, every reading was normal. Then Priya's left hand moved beneath the table. That was our signal. Pressure was rising near Gate 7, not from the simulated stormwater, from the riverside. The contractor below us had activated the remote valve actuator. Nathan continued speaking. Our integrated system can identify a developing threat before human operators would even recognize it. An amber warning appeared on the main display. Eastern Relief Channel Pressure Variance. The city engineer looked toward Nathan. That is not part of the simulation. Nathan did not appear surprised. He tapped the tablet. This is precisely why we scheduled the demonstration under real storm conditions. The system is detecting an external pressure event. Priya looked at me. The river gauge remained below Gate 7's natural backflow threshold. The pressure was being created artificially. Nathan pressed another command. The amber warning became red. Gate 7, seal failure. A mechanical alarm sounded across the property. Employees turned toward the eastern workshops. Reporters raised their cameras. River Crown representatives stepped closer to Charles Redding, speaking urgently. Nathan kept his voice calm. Everyone remain where you are. This is a controlled emergency response. It was neither controlled nor an emergency, at least not yet. The independent monitor showed the gate beginning to open. 5%, 9:12. The automatic shutoff should have engaged at 10. It did not. Lee stood near the insurer's table. She saw the same number and covered her mouth. Nathan tapped the tablet again. The main presentation screen displayed a new message. Manuel David Reisd required to prevent constructural failure. He had created the condition, then arranged for the system to ask him to solve it. The city engineer stepped forward. Do not issue a manual command until we verify the exterior pressure. Nathan did not look at him. We do not have time. You are required to follow the approved test sequence. The approved sequence did not anticipate an active gate failure. It is not a gate failure, Priya said. Her voice carried farther than I expected. Nathan turned. She pointed toward the independent gauge. Exterior river pressure is below the threshold. The gate is opening against normal conditions. A murmur moved through the crowd. Nathan's expression remained steady. Your equipment may not be calibrated. The insurer witnessed the calibration. Then the old mechanical port is corrupted. The mechanical port is reading correctly. Nathan looked toward me. There was no affection left in his face. Only calculation. You interfered with the system. I allowed my shoulders to sag. I handed you the badge. You retained access, not to Gate 7. He turned back to the crowd. This is exactly the kind of unauthorized interference we have been trying to prevent. The gate reached 18%. Somewhere below us, metal groaned. Eddie appeared at the edge of the market hall and lifted one hand. The lower workshops were clear. The apprentices were gone. The remaining tenants had been moved west. Only then did I breathe normally. Nathan raised the tablet. I am issuing a protective isolation command. The city engineer reached for his arm. Nathan stepped away and pressed the screen. For less than a second, the tablet displayed the authorization request. Administrative Device NCO1. I sought Matic Safety Limits. Nathan selected yes. The command traveled into the system. Every independent gauge reacted at once. Gate 7 moved from 18% to 32%. The intake pumps remained active. Pressure surged through the eastern service tunnel. The approved safety alarms began sounding, but Nathan's programming ignored them exactly as Leah had warned. On the polished presentation screen, the system displayed chaos. On Priya's monitor, it displayed responsibility, command source, NCZO1 authenticated user. Nathan Cole manual override. Active Daniel Hargrove photographed the screen, while the insurer's recording system preserved the data. Nathan saw him for the first time. His confidence broke. What are you recording? The operational event, Daniel said. You do not have authority to seize company data. It is insurer-owned monitoring equipment. A deep impact sounded beneath the loading terrace. The crowd recoiled. Water began entering the eastern service tunnel. Nathan looked toward Gate 7, then toward the tablet in his hands. He had expected damage. He had not expected the command to follow him into daylight. The pressure reached the level Priya and I had established as our final safe limit. I moved. Nathan shouted my name as I crossed the edge of the stage and entered the maintenance corridor. Miriam had already given the fire marshal our planned route. No one stopped me. I descended the stairs toward the east gallery. The concrete walls trembled. Water hissed through the gate housing with enough force to shake rust from the overhead pipes. The blue current contractor stood near the actuator case. When he saw me, he reached for the control cable. Step away from it, I said. He laughed once. You should not be down here. Neither should he. Behind me, 2 fire officers entered the gallery. The contractor ran toward the lower passage. I did not follow. Martin's bypass stood behind the safety railing. The new steel collar still constrained the pivot. Sam had left the hidden shim partially loosened, but the collar was Nathan's final precaution. I pulled the emergency cutting lever Eddie had installed inside the preservation housing. A small charge released the retaining pin. The collar dropped away. I wrapped both hands around the weighted release arm and pulled. For one terrible second, nothing happened. Then the mechanism shifted. The counterweight fell. Old iron moved through the wall with a deep, grinding roar. The bypass opened, redirecting the pressure away from the workshops and into the empty western containment basin. The gallery shook as thousands of gallons changed direction. Then the pressure gauge began to fall, 42, 31, 19. The gate remained open, but the occupied property was safe. When I returned to the stage, rain was blowing beneath the pavilion. Nathan stood beside the monitoring station, arguing with Priya and the city engineer. This proves the old infrastructure is unstable, he said. Her unauthorized mechanical intervention caused the pressure event. Priya pointed toward the independent display. No, Mr. Cole, pressure rose before Mrs. Voss entered the gallery. That device is wrong, so is the insurer's gauge. The network was compromised. The gauges are not connected to your network. Nathan looked toward the screen. Every public monitor had changed. The polished blue diagram was gone. In its place was the raw command record, the time, the valve sequence, the disabled automatic limits, the administrative device code, and Nathan's authenticated name. He stared at it without speaking. Around him, cameras continued recording. For several seconds, Nathan stared at his own name on the monitors. Rain struck the pavilion roof in hard sheets. Reporters moved closer. Employees who had applauded him an hour earlier now watched as though the man on stage had changed shape. Nathan recovered first. This display has been manipulated, he said. Eleanor had access to the old controls. She created a false command record. Priya did not raise her voice. The independent gauges were installed under insurer supervision. Their memory was sealed before today. The command was authenticated through your device. My tablet was compromised. Daniel Hargrove stepped forward. Then place it on the table and do not touch it. Nathan held the tablet tighter. Celeste Warren hurried onto the stage and whispered to him. He pulled away. This is my property operation, he said. No, I answered, it is my property. You were given limited authority to protect it. Miriam lifted a copy of the proxy. That authority required preservation of operational data and made Mr. Cole personally responsible for commands issued under his credentials. Nathan looked at her as if he had forgotten she existed. Then Leah walked onto the stage carrying the River Crown file. Her father saw it and became still. "Lee," he said, "give that to me." She stopped beside Miriam. "No." The word was quiet, but it traveled through the speakers. Nathan stepped toward her. "You do not understand what you have. I designed the buildings. You produced preliminary concepts. I removed public access because you told me the city required it. I erased the apprenticeship shops because you said they would be relocated. I changed the evacuation drawings because you said Gate 7 was being sealed." Her voice trembled, but she continued, "You knew the gate would open." Nathan glanced toward the cameras. "This is not the place for a family disagreement. You made it this place." Lee handed the file to Miriam. Inside was the complete River Crown agreement. Miriam displayed the signature page beneath the document camera. Nathan's name appeared beside Charles Redding's. So did the $12 million performance payment. A second page showed the discounted purchase price if Voss Landing suffered an irreversible operational event before the end of the month. Then Miriam revealed the clause missing from Leah's photograph. Payment was contingent upon irreversible loss of existing operations and verified failure of the eastern flood barrier. Gate 7 was not an accident. It was a condition of Nathan's reward. Charles Redding pushed through the crowd toward the exit. Daniel blocked his path. "You may want to remain available. State investigators will have questions about this agreement." Redding's confidence disappeared. "I had no knowledge of sabotage." Nathan turned on him. "You approved the schedule. I approved a redevelopment timeline. You knew the property had to fail. I knew it had to be condemned through lawful inspection." They had begun blaming each other before anyone asked a formal question. Then Sam Baird walked toward the stage. His clothes were wet, and his face looked gray beneath the pavilion lights. He carried a thick envelope. Nathan pointed at him. "Go back to the gallery." Sam stopped. "No." He climbed the stage steps and placed the envelope beside Miriam's documents. Inside were copies of falsified maintenance reports, blue current work orders, and debt notices from a coal urban renewal holding company. Sam faced the employees instead of me. "I opened the east gate for the contractors," he said. "I gave them access to Pump Station 3. I signed reports saying Mrs. Voss delayed repairs she never refused." A low sound moved through the crowd. Sam's hand shook. "Nathan bought my gambling debts. He told me I would lose my house and pension if I did not cooperate. That is not an excuse. I knew after the first flood that the failures were staged." Nathan's face tightened. "He is a debtor trying to avoid responsibility." Sam nodded. "I am responsible." He looked toward the apprentices' empty section. "I kept telling myself no one would be there. Then Workshop 6 flooded. Today I helped weaken the bypass because I was afraid." He turned to me. "I am sorry, Eleanor. I wanted to forgive him because Martin had loved him. But forgiveness offered too quickly can hide consequences." "You will tell the investigators everything," I said. "Yes," Nathan laughed once, "so this is your case. A confused old woman, a corrupt employee, and my disloyal daughter." Daniel opened another file. "No, there is also the insurance trail." He displayed payments from Blue Current Recovery to a consulting company registered to Dr. Malcolm Reeves, my physician, the man whose letter had helped Nathan question my competence. Over 6 months, Dr. Reeves had received $90,000 in consulting fees from the company paid to repair Nathan's manufactured damage. Miriam placed my medical release beside the payments. The letter omitted that Mrs. Voss's concentration problems occurred immediately after her husband's death, she said. It also omitted later examinations showing no progressive impairment. Leah looked at her father. "You paid her doctor?" Nathan's control finally broke. "I protected this family from a woman who would have let the property rot around her." He pointed at me. "She was going to bury all of us with Martin's memory." The words struck because they contained the last truth he could still weaponize. I had clung too tightly, I had delayed change, but my failures had not commanded him to flood occupied buildings. "You could have challenged me honestly," I said. "You chose to manufacture a disaster." Sirens approached from the entrance road. Nathan heard them. His eyes moved toward the lower dock passage. He dropped the tablet and ran. Nathan crossed the stage, shoved past Redding, and disappeared through the Eastern Service door. before the nearest officer reached the pavilion. Eddie and 2 fire officers followed. I moved to the loading terrace. Below us, storm water poured through the containment channel. Martin's bypass had opened. The normal dock exit was submerged. Nathan emerged onto the lower platform and stopped. Behind him came the officers. In front of him, dark water rose across the only remaining path. He had spent months forcing pressure into Voss Landing. Now the river had closed around him. Nathan stood on the lower dock, with storm water covering the path in front of him, and 2 fire officers closing in from behind. For one irrational second, I thought he might jump. The Ohio River was not overflowing its banks, but the current beside Voss Landing moved fast beneath the rain. Debris spun through the dark water. Nathan looked from the river to the officers, searching for an exit that did not exist. "Do not make this worse," one officer called. Nathan laughed bitterly. "You have no idea what worse looks like." He stepped onto the submerged walkway. His polished shoe slipped immediately. He struck the railing hard enough to bend over it, one arm hanging above the water. Eddie reached him first. The same man Nathan had threatened with the loss of his pension grabbed the back of Nathan's jacket and pulled him away from the edge. Nathan collapsed onto the dock. He did not thank Eddie. He began shouting that the command logs were false, that I had orchestrated the entire event to destroy him, and that Leah had stolen privileged company records. The officers placed him in restraints while he was still speaking. There was no dramatic silence when they led him away. Only rain, alarms, and the deep mechanical sound of the pumps returning the system to normal. Justice rarely arrives as cleanly as people imagine. It does not erase the damage, it begins counting it. The city immediately suspended the condemnation process. Voss Landing was closed for 4 days, while independent engineers inspected Gate 7, Pump Station 3, and the lower service tunnels. They confirmed that the main structures remained sound. The damage Nathan intended to make irreversible could be repaired. River Crown Development announced that Charles Redding had acted without full corporate authorization. That explanation lasted less than 48 hours. Investigators found emails discussing the financial advantage of a public flood failure. River Crown withdrew from the acquisition and placed Redding on administrative leave, but the company could not withdraw from the documents it had signed. The Attorney General's office opened a civil investigation. The insurance carrier froze every account connected to Blue Current Recovery. Daniel's team traced payments through 3 coal urban renewal subsidiaries. Blue Current had inflated cleanup invoices, billed for equipment never installed, and charged the insurer for repairing damage its own contractors had created. Nathan's company began collapsing before he was formally charged. Banks suspended its credit lines, clients canceled projects, 2 municipal boards removed coal urban renewal from approved contractor lists. Employees arrived at the downtown office one Monday morning and discovered that the locks had been changed by a court-appointed receiver. Nathan had spent years building a reputation for saving neglected properties. In less than a week, no one trusted him near one. The criminal charges came in stages: insurance fraud, falsification of safety records, conspiracy to damage insured property, attempted fraudulent transfer of real estate, reckless endangerment. The prosecutor did not charge Nathan with attempted murder, despite what many people demanded online. The evidence showed that he had knowingly endangered an occupied property, but proving he intended a specific person to die would have required assumptions the law could not make. I accepted that justice built on exaggeration is only another unstable wall. Nathan was denied control of his company while awaiting trial. His passport was surrendered. The court prohibited him from contacting employees, witnesses, or me. He tried to contact Leah twice. The first message blamed River Crown, the second blamed me. He never asked whether she was all right. Sam Baird confessed to opening the service gates, falsifying reports, weakening the mechanical bypass, and assisting the Blue Current contractors. His cooperation helped investigators identify Peter Lang and the men who had entered Pump Station 3. Miriam warned me not to interfere with the prosecutor's decision. I did not ask for Sam to be spared. I wrote a statement describing his decades of service, Nathan's financial coercion, and the fact that Sam ultimately preserved evidence and confessed publicly. I also described the danger he had knowingly helped create. Mercy without truth would have dishonored the people in Workshop 6. Sam accepted a plea agreement that required restitution, probation, community service, and testimony against Nathan and Blue Current. He lost his management position. The employee trust protected the portion of his pension he had earned before the fraud began. When he came to see me, he stood outside Martin's workshop and waited until I invited him in. "I do not expect forgiveness," he said. "That is good." He nodded. "I want to repair the release assembly properly. You will do it under supervision." For the first time, his eyes lifted. That was not reconciliation. It was a beginning small enough. To be honest, Dr. Malcolm Reeves surrendered his medical records after investigators presented the Blue Current payments. His letter about my competence had omitted later examination results and exaggerated symptoms he knew were associated with grief. The state medical board suspended his license pending a hearing. Miriam had the emergency competency petition dismissed. The judge reviewed my independent cognitive evaluation, then looked over the top of her glasses at Nathan's abandoned filing. "Mrs. Voss appears capable of understanding both her property and the people attempting to take it." It was the closest thing to an apology the court could offer. The public treated me like a hero afterward. Reporters called me the engineer who outsmarted a developer. Strangers mailed letters describing relatives who had used age, illness, or grief to strip them of authority. I appreciated their kindness, but they had not raised Nathan. They had not watched him fall asleep over algebra homework or stand proudly beside Martin after welding his first clean seam. The man in restraints was also the boy with the red toolbox. Both were real. That was the price no court could calculate. 3 weeks after the demonstration, I entered Nathan's former office. His leather chair had been removed. Martin's drafting stool had been returned to the corner. On the desk lay competing proposals for the future of Voss Landing. Some employees wanted me restored as operations director. Investors offered emergency capital in exchange for ownership. The city proposed purchasing the riverfront infrastructure. Leah stood beside the window, waiting for my decision. For most of my life, saving Voss Landing had meant keeping control of it. Now I understood that control could become another kind of floodwall, protective at first, then dangerous when no one was allowed to change it. I placed my old brass key ring on the desk. "We are not selling it," I said. Lee released a breath. "But I am not taking it back." She turned toward me. I looked through the glass at the repair yard, the market roofs, and the river moving beyond them. "We are going to build something that neither Nathan nor I can ever own alone." 10 months later, I stood inside Martin's old workshop while 16 teenagers argued over a pressure diagram. The argument made me happy. One student believed the blockage was inside the intake line. Another insisted the gauge itself had failed. A girl named Tasha circled 2 numbers with a grease pencil and told both boys they were ignoring the change in flow direction. She was right. Beyond the open workshop doors, morning sunlight moved across the Ohio River. The water appeared calm, but I had lived beside it too long to mistake calm for stillness. Voss Landing had changed, so had I. The property now belonged to the Voss Landing Public Benefit Trust, a structure Miriam designed to prevent any single person, investor, or family member from controlling its future. I donated my majority ownership. The employee trust received permanent representation on the governing board. The city held a limited infrastructure interest in the flood control systems. The Apprenticeship Foundation controlled the training buildings. A community land covenant protected public river access and prohibited private luxury redevelopment. No hotel could replace the repair yard, no tower could close the observation deck, no desperate relative could sign the entire place away. The trust charter required independent engineering reviews every 3 years, open financial records, and employee approval before any major change in operations. Martin would have complained that the document was too long. Then he would have read every page twice. We did not preserve Voss Landing exactly as it had been. That would have repeated my mistake. 2 of the oldest workshops were converted into classrooms for flood resilience training, marine electrical repair, and advanced welding. The market received new drainage, accessible walkways, and a roof that no longer leaked over the produce stalls. Pump Station 3 was rebuilt with modern controls and independent mechanical backups. We kept the local service memory modules. Priya insisted on that. She accepted a seat on the Trust's engineering committee and attended every meeting with a red pen. Retirement, she said, had never meant allowing other people to become careless. Eddie became director of river operations. His pension vested without interference, although he claimed the promotion created more paperwork than Nathan ever threatened him with. He still worked occasional night shifts because he trusted the river more when he could hear it himself. Sam returned twice a week under the terms of his community service agreement. He trained apprentices in mechanical maintenance and never entered a control gallery alone. Some employees refused to speak to him. Others eventually did. I did not ask either group to change. Consequences are not cruelty. They are the shape truth leaves behind. Nathan pleaded guilty to insurance fraud, conspiracy, falsifying safety records, and reckless endangerment after Peter Lang and Charles Redding agreed to testify. His attorneys tried to describe him as a respected developer who made desperate decisions during a financial crisis. The judge answered that financial pressure did not program a floodgate, falsify medical evidence, or place young people inside a manufactured emergency. Nathan received a prison sentence long enough that he would be an old man when he finished paying for what he had done. I attended the sentencing. Lee did not. I did not speak to Nathan, and he did not look at me. For months I wondered whether refusing to say goodbye made me cold. Eventually, I understood that I had already said goodbye many times. I said it when he used Martin's memory to gain my trust. I said it when he called control protection. I said it when he placed strangers inside the pump gallery. The courtroom only gave the farewell an official date. Leah left Coal Urban Renewal before the company entered liquidation. For several weeks, she stayed in my guest room and barely spoke. She believed she had helped design the destruction of everything Martin and I built. I did not tell her she was blameless. She was not. She had ignored questions because the answers threatened her career and her relationship with her father. But she had also returned with the contract when silence would have protected her. Both truths mattered. Healing began with work. Leah helped redesign the lower workshops and refused payment during the first 6 months. She met with every tenant whose space had appeared beneath one of her glass towers. Some forgave her, some did not. She listened to all of them. One afternoon, she brought me plans for the new training campus. Her original design placed my office above the main workshop, overlooking the entire property. I crossed it out. "You need somewhere to work," she said. "I have somewhere. Where?" I pointed to the classroom. She smiled. For the first time in weeks, Leah now served as the Trust's director of design. But she did not hold Nathan's old authority. No one did. She had to present proposals, answer questions, revise plans, and accept that good intentions were not proof of good decisions. Our relationship did not return to what it had been. It became more honest. That was better. My old office became a shared planning room. Martin's drafting stool remained beside the window, available to anyone willing to sit on something uncomfortable. I kept no permanent desk. On the morning of the Trust's first anniversary, the students gathered around Pump Controller 3 for a diagnostic lesson. Tasha identified the false reading before anyone else. "How did you know?" I asked. "The pressure changed, but the river level didn't." I nodded. "Always compare the story with the physical evidence." Mounted beside the controller was a small glass case. Inside rested the brass coupling I found on the night Nathan took my keys. Beside it hung one of Martin's original hand-drawn system plans. A metal plaque beneath them read, "Measure what is real. Never surrender to what is merely repeated." After the lesson, I walked alone to the observation deck. The river moved steadily below me. For years I thought strength meant holding every gate closed with my own hands. I know better now. A sound structure does not depend on one person remaining forever. It survives because pressure has somewhere safe to go, weaknesses can be admitted, and responsibility is shared before the storm arrives. Behind me, the students laughed as they restarted the pump. Ahead of me, sunlight opened across the water. Martin was gone. Nathan was gone. The life I had fought to preserve no longer existed in its old form. But what mattered had survived, not the buildings exactly as we built them, not my authority, The work, the dignity, the chance for someone younger to stand at a control panel, question the first explanation, and protect people they might never meet. That was enough. If this story reminded you that age is not weakness and family does not excuse betrayal, share it with someone who needs to hear that protecting your dignity is never something to apologize for.